Welcome to Star Trek Story, Myth, and Arcs podcast. Its 5-year mission to explore Star Trek arcs and themes, seek out new story directions, and boldly tell stories that no one has told before.
Hailing frequencies open, sir.
All right, welcome to Star Trek Story, Myth, and Arcs. I have a very special guest beaming to us from the United Kingdom, the author of a lot of Star Trek novels, Una McCormack. Welcome to the Star Trek Story, Myth, and Arcs podcast. We're going to talk about all your work, but eventually we're going to talk spoilers for your Picard novel and how that came to be and how it was constructed. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
All right, let's talk about your origin story with Star Trek and science fiction, because like me, you're a fan of all science fiction, not just Star Trek. And I'm wondering how you got into it.
Yeah, so I'm of a certain age that growing up in Britain, Star Trek, the original series, really wasn't on very much. So growing up in the 70s, I didn't really get to see the original series. And really my introduction to Star Trek is the movies. They're coming out when I'm maybe about, I'm just sort of hitting 11 or 12. So they're coming out during my teens. So exactly that kind of time when I'm kind of wanting to watch science fiction. And then once I'm hooked, which I pretty much am straight away, because I love spaceships, basically, it was an easy sell to get me to watch Next Generation. Easy sell, but once again, there I am stuck in Britain, and we have we've got 4 television channels by then. We've got 4 terrestrial channels. Satellite television is just arriving, and that's where you can watch the Next Generation. We don't have that in our house, so I'm slowly going to a Blockbuster video shop, which once a month gets a tape in. And then, like many sort of science fiction fan teenagers, I'm going home and watching this repeatedly on a Friday night whilst the rest of my friends are out clubbing. So that's my kind of introduction to Star Trek. And then once I got onto Next Gen and the episodes are coming so slowly, the way I'm kind of filling those gaps is I'm going to the library and I'm getting the paperback novels. So I'm reading Next Generation novels from about when I'm about 17 or 18 onwards. So people like Jean Laura, Peter David, and so on. So that's sort of how I'm getting into Star Trek. Always been a Doctor Who fan, Blake Seven fan. Those are the things we're watching in Britain. Star Cops as well. And then I guess Deep Space Nine arrives just when I'm at college, at university. And I won't go anywhere near it because I'm a Babylon 5 fan. That's one of those things that you commit to, and then you sort of spend the entire rest of your life eating humble pie. So I absolutely refuse to watch Deep Space Nine. A friend of mine lent me his tape of Way of the Warrior, and he said, you really must. I'm going, no, it's not Straczynski. I know this. It's absolute nonsense. It's rubbish. He lends me Way of the Warrior, and we're about 6 minutes in. And I'm ringing him up, going, bring me the rest of the tapes immediately. I must watch all of this, because about 6 minutes in, I think we get our first sight of Garak, and that's it. I'm a lost woman. So that's me with Star Trek, really. And once I'd gotten to Deep Space Nine, I'm sucked in.
I had kind of a similar thing with Deep Space Nine because I didn't watch the first couple seasons. I just that time in my life, I was very involved with punk rock. I was going to shows, and I've always been a Star Trek fan, and somehow I just missed it. And then my freshman year of college, I watched The Search, the episodes where they found, first, and I was like, whoa, this is great. This is great.
Yeah.
I got to go back and get into it. So I had the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I know that you're involved somewhat in the academic world and scholarship towards science fiction. How did you get involved with that specifically?
I guess so what I was doing was writing fan fiction. Now, again, I'm a kind of generation that you couldn't really professionalize these kinds of hobbies. So my PhD's in sociology, and I did quite a very straightforward sociology PhD about large government surveys and this kind of thing. I managed to quote Ursula Le Guin in it because it was about narrative and bureaucracy, of my abiding themes actually. You couldn't really get away with saying, no, I'm just going to do a PhD on Tolkien, because you couldn't do it. The people weren't there. The people who would supervise you were my generation. We had to come through. So whilst I was kind of doing these things that I was only tangentially interested in, or I was having to disguise my interests, I was also writing a lot of fan fiction and getting involved in the quite early scholarship on that. So the scholarship on fan fiction is kind of emerging from about 95, 96 onwards, which is kind of when I'm doing my PhD, my master's, then my PhD. And then sort of I think what happens is once you've got a PhD and once you've got an academic post, which I eventually got, I became a lecturer in creative writing actually. You find that you're in a position to just say, well, actually, these are my interests. So I'm going to start writing about these and building those networks and doing that work. So I've written on fan fiction. I've written a little on Le Guin. I've written on Vonda McIntyre. I've written on the way that women write fan fiction to retool authors like Tolkien and sort of inscribe themselves into heteronormative and patriarchal texts and this kind of thing. And just devouring and reading a lot of science fiction. That's kind of how I've ended up with a sort of academic career. I'm not an academic anymore. I stopped that to become a full-time writer about a year and a half ago. But I'm still doing academic work. I've just done a collection of essays on Lois McMaster Bujold, just co-edited a collection on her work. And got plenty more kind of projects lined up. I've just announced actually, I'm working with a university press in Britain called Goldsmiths Press. We're setting up a new imprint about to publish intersectional feminist science fiction. So that's my current project that I've got underway. So yeah, it was sort of like all these things. I sort of ended up as a novelist by accident. I ended up writing about science fiction by accident. But it was all the things I wanted to do anyway.
Well, and I've found that a lot of the best writers of great tie-in fiction for these franchises, especially Star Trek, if you look at, like, for example, David Mack or Greg Cox or yourself, it's people who are well-read in the genre outside of the franchise who are learned and well-read of authors like Le Guin and McIntyre and like the wider scope. I think I've seen that very, very consistently. So I think that's cool, and I think it's really great that you do that research. And that new press you're talking about, I saw your announcement about that. That sounds great.
I hope so. Yeah, we're very excited.
I love feminist science fiction as well. I'm excited to check out, before we get really into your tie-in work, I am very excited to check out your original novel, The Undefeated. Can you give us just a little bit on that?
Yeah, so that was lovely because the editor I worked with on the Star Trek novels, the guy who originally commissioned me, was a guy called Marco Palmieri, who was the editor on the Trek book range for a very long time. And we worked together, and then he left Simon & Schuster, he went somewhere else, and we said we must work together again. We had so much fun. Really admired his sort of ability to tell a story. Actually, really great editor. And we were sort of chatting on Twitter actually, and said we must work together. And I said, do you know what I've always wanted to do? I've always wanted to do a feminist high plains drifter in space. And he said, yeah, I'll commission that. And he did. So it's a feminist high plains drifter in space, I guess, is the it's a kind of little reflection on it's a bit of Martha Gellhorn in there as well. It's about a journalist who's a war reporter married to a famous novelist, divorced from a famous novelist. So it's about that's the best I can describe it. Feminist high plains drifter in space.
That sounds excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm a late in life convert Whovian, So I am interested in, of course, you wrote some Doctor Who stuff. Who's your favorite Doctor? What was your in with Doctor Who? And
Oh well, I'm that kind of age in Britain where Doctor Who was just on. It was Saturday tea time. It was everybody watched it because there weren't any TV channels, so that's what you watched on a Saturday night. You watched Doctor Who and a whole lineup. So it was just on. My dad was a fan of science fiction, so he loved things like The Prisoner, TV science fiction. So Doctor Who was always on, and you just watched it and watched it and watched it. And I think my earliest memory is Pertwee. There's a story called Planet of the Spiders, and I always joke that I wasn't scared of the spiders, I was scared of the Buddhists. It gave me a lifelong fear of Buddhists. And then you remember all of Tom Baker, but actually my doctor was I think my doctor was Peter Davis, and I think just because the stories of his first season are really arresting and really vivid and unusual. I was at I was probably about 10, and that's a very, very, very fertile age for your imagination, I think. You're just getting more outward thinking and able to understand more complex story. And they just hit at the right time. So I love Peter Davidson's performance. He's a really good actor. And I loved the stories as well. So Davison, I would say, was my doctor. And I just stuck with it. And, you never give up on Doctor Who, really. It's like supporting a really rubbish football club. They'll come good in the end.
well, yeah, and I think it's funny. David Tennant is probably my favorite Doctor because I got into it with the new series, but in a strange way, Peter Capaldi just I just loved his run as the Doctor. Whether the stories were great or not, I thought he was perfect. And
he's amazing, and he sort of really lives. I mean, first of all, it's incredibly sweet that he's a massive Doctor Who fan and had a letter in Doctor Who magazine when he was a lad. But then I think he's really done that thing, which they all do to some extent, but I think Peter Capaldi has really embraced this. He's just lovely to people. He will just turn up at children's hospitals and give people presents and make their encounter with if they meet the Doctor, it will be magical and special, and he's just all around fantastic. A really good actor. Does he have an Oscar or something, Matt? Didn't he do like a very small film or something? He's got. No. I think so. I know this might be something I've pulled out of my head. Maybe I've just given him an Oscar in my heart. But he's great. Somebody fact check that.
Yeah.
But he's terrific.
Yeah, I thought he was great. So you've written for obviously started with fan fiction. That was like a thing that and you were able to like make it real. How's that transition in your mind? Like, I'm sure you're still pinching yourself every time you get to work on these projects.
Yeah, I can't believe I get to do this all day. It's just pretty amazing. I mean, I was doing it all day anyway, so now I'm kind of doing it in a sustainable way. It's just incredible. I mean, I was writing fan fiction from drawing stickmen cartoons as a kind of kid, 6 or 7, then writing little stories, mostly Blake 7 actually, which was my real love. And then, the minute you watch Deep Space Nine and you get to the end of it, I assume I can do spoilers for Deep Space Nine. It's long enough now. I've got to fix this. I've got to get this right. So I'm just not happy.
I'm assuming if someone's listening to this podcast, they're a serious.
They're probably okay, aren't they? Yeah. So, and I just had to fix it. I couldn't leave Cardassia like that. I couldn't bear it. So I've sort of spent 20 odd years writing through the trauma of that. And that's what most of my novels are about. So kind of the reconstruction of post-war Cardassia, and it's finding its way out of that kind of moral hole that it finds itself in. I just it's
question. Why Cardassia? What was so fascinating to you about Cardassia? I mean,
Garrick, absolutely Garrick. Okay. What kind of civilization could create a person like this. And just wanting to explore that in all its nuances. But I think also it was remember we're still in the 90s, the late 90s. I think it was I think I've said any kind of thinking European has to think through the sort of history of the last half of the 20th century.
And Reconstruction from World War II.
Yeah, exactly that. And what led what caused the rise of fascism? It's very timely again. What are the conditions under which countries decide to annihilate themselves? I mean, it's playing out. I feel as if it's playing out in Britain at the moment, and I wanted to understand that and learn why. And more importantly, I wanted to kind of map the route to reconstruction and the way that a nation confronts its past and deals with the traumas that it's inflicted on itself and others more significantly, and how you move beyond that into hope and peace and connectivity, I guess. So that's what interested me.
Yeah, and the roots of it are all there in Deep Space Nine, with the relationship between the Bajorans and the Cardassians, and I'm like you. I'm one of those people who watches, and because I have writer brain, I start thinking like, well, what does that say about this, and what does that say about that, and so I do a lot of the same things.
Yeah, and also just particularly the context and the pathway that creates people. So I was watching. I've not watched it in ages actually. I was watching The Wire again today. Robert Hewitt Wolf's, the Garrick addiction story. And there's a guy in the final act, that last scene with Bashir and Garrick in the Replimat or whatever it is. The scene opens with a guy walking. He's a guy in kind of it looks a bit like Jem Hadar actually. He's in the background. He walks through a door. You see him walk past, and then he sees someone and he kind of greets them and pats his heart. And he's only ever background. And I'm like, who is this guy? What's his story? Who's he come to meet? Why is he there? And he's only ever backdrop. Because obviously I've told a lot of stories about Garrick and Bashir. Now I'm telling the stories about the guy who walks fast in the background. But writer brain does that. You want to know what brought these people here. And you start spinning the story, I think.
Oh yeah. And I admitted to you before we started recording that I have not read your Cardassia stuff. I'm really looking forward to it, partially because Bashir and Garrick are my two favorite characters on Deep Space Nine, and Deep Space Nine is my favorite of Star Trek. So
quite right.
So I know we're on similar brain there, and I have a feeling they will speak to me. Did you get a chance to see the social hour where they did that little audio drama where they
oh god, it was bliss.
Yeah,
it's absolutely wonderful. It's just so lovely. At last we get to see them as what we always knew they were. You guys knew they were. And I think I guess you've seen the documentary about making Deep Space Nine, and they
I
talk
got to
about
see it at the theater here, which was great.
So. Oh, I saw it at I'll one up on you. I saw it at its premiere, a Star Trek convention, and I had I was because I was a guest there. I somehow wangled my place in the VIP seats, and I had most of the cast of Deep Space Nine to my left, and behind me was Walter Koenig.
Oh wow! That's
so that was from sitting there going, "Oh no, don't chuck me out." So, but there's a moment in that where I think Ira Burst says we missed the boat on this, and we should have gone for it. And yeah, they should have. But that was television in the 90s. Yeah, it seems crazy now, doesn't it? But there we were.
Yeah. I think that they definitely realized that. Well, Garrick, because of his mystery and all the mystery that's involved with him, it does make him one of the most fascinating characters. The episode that I recently revisited for him, we did an episode about Star Trek and horror of this podcast, and my co-host for that episode, we rewatched the episode where the Tarek Noor, where with the was basically the slasher film with Garrick.
Empok Noor, isn't it?
Yeah,
Empok Noor. Yeah,
yeah.
I knew which one you were going to say when you said Garrick and horror.
Check me.
Empok Noor.
Check me for sure. But watching that episode, that last scene where he shows his regret is one of the most emotional scenes of the whole series, and like you just really Andrew Robinson really put weight and depth into that character in a way.
Oh, it's just amazing. His memoir's worth reading. The bit I love about that scene, that exchange with O'Brien, is I think if this was Next Gen or Voyager, they would end with a kind of full rapprochement. They would have a meeting of minds, and there would be an embrace, but there'd be a buddies. Not Deep Space Nine. It's like, yeah, I'll see you, and it's like, not if I see you first. It's just great. It's like, you're clearly not safe. So I love that people are trying to connect, but not always managing it because they're quite damaged in various ways, I think, on Deep Space Nine. So I love that.
Okay, one last question before we get into the Picard novel, which is, what is, and all the franchises, I kind of sort of said this before, but of all the franchises you've written for, what is the most special part about writing in each? Just a little bit of each, starting with Doctor Who.
Oh, well, Doctor Who's just brilliant fun. It's anything goes, and you just have a whale of a time writing Doctor Who. It's just a hoot from start to finish. You just got to play. I remember someone saying to me once that Doctor Who sucks up story. Yeah, it's like you're trying to come up with ideas and ideas, so you're constantly having to generate something fresh, and yet to keep that basic format of a madman in a box. Yeah, so it's I think particularly since Russell T Davies sort of got his hands on it, you feel it's got this kind of energy and excitement and verve, and a little dark edge, because there's always a dark edge in a Russell T Davies script, but it's just a kind of boundless inventiveness, and you feel like you've really got to bring your game to that. So that's why I like writing Doctor Who. Also, it's Doctor Who. Yay!
At Lake 7?
Oh, my first love, the show I learned how to write from. Writing those characters are just formative on my imagination. They're just so important to me. Their voices, their dynamics, their bitching, the way the stories are constructed. I learned a lot about story construction of dovetailing A and B plots, and if they don't dovetail, then at least they must have a thematic connection. Making ensembles work. All of this I learned from observing Blake Seven, which I just adore. And to have loved a show for that long. I mean, I started watching that when I was about 10. Wrote fan fiction when I was about 15 or 16. To get to write a script that the actors deliver, which I've done for Big Finish. I've done audio drama for them. Just incredible. It's like wow, how did I get to do that?
Now, with all the fan fiction that you wrote when you were young, have you adapted any of those and turned those into professional?
No. You've got to be really careful about that. So I've never done that. No, I've sort of left it. My fan fiction, it's quite a sort of open secret that my fan fiction's online. But no, you've got to be really careful about that. You just leave it and move on. So no, I've never done that. And usually it's not quite what they want. I think if you're a lot of fan fiction is very, very, very introspective, and when you're reading fan fiction, you're quite happy to sit for 15,000 words just reading somebody noodling about in their head about their emotions, but it doesn't make 50 minutes of exciting audio drama. So you're not necessarily, that's not necessarily what you're writing, but a character introspection and psychological motivation, I think, is what I'm interested in doing. And that comes from a fan fiction. Well, that comes from every sensibility, doesn't it? But you could do it for ages in fan fiction.
Now, obviously, you're not going to give us any story ideas, but are there any franchises that you would just die to write for that you haven't had the chance to already?
I never got a chance to write for Firefly, which I think would have been a lark. And then
Tim
I
LeBon just
guess,
did it.
pardon?
Tim LeBon just released a Firefly novel, so they're back in the Firefly novel business.
Yeah. I suppose so.
It-
I guess the thing I would love to do, because I've written reams and reams of fan fiction, is the minute that they start doing licensed novels set on Middle Earth, I'll be in like a flash. It's like,
Gotcha.
get me in. Let me do my Fall of Numenor novel that I've always wanted to write. That's my thwarted PhD. I would have, if I'd been able to do a creative writing PhD, I'd have done a novel set during the Fall of Numenor. So that's, if anyone wants to commission that,
Right.
I'm here to write it. So I'd love to do something. But I've written reams of Tolkien fanfiction, just tons of it. So yeah, I'd love to do that. So those would be the big ones. And then there's a short-lived TV show called Jericho, which I would have loved to have wrapped up. And then maybe I guess Babylon 5 or something like that. But that's pretty self-contained. So I'd rather have had his version than mine. So yeah.
All right, so we're going to get into your Picard novel, and so from this point on, we're going to assume that listeners have read Picard, Last Best Hope, I believe is the title, and
That's right.
it's been a couple months. You were finishing up a project. I read it in I think July, so. But I do have notes to keep me back on track on the
Well, I never remember books after I've written them, so this could be interesting. No, I'm only joking. I've flipped through it subsequently.
Well, good. Well, this project must have been. Now you've written Picard before, right? So you've thought about Picard before. But how did this project specifically come to you? Because this is a big deal, writing the prequel going into Patrick Stewart's return to the character after all these years. How did this one happen?
Well, they asked me, and I sort of didn't eat their hands.
Right.
They said, "Una, would you like to do this one?" I was, Christ, yes. God, absolutely. Of course I want to do it. Please immediately let me do this. Yeah, yes. I mean, I've been working with those guys for a long time now, and done a lot of books with them. And they decided that I was the one that they wanted to do this one, and I'm just really grateful. It was absolutely amazing from start to finish. It was just it was a joy to be involved. What happens when you do a project like this is that you work very closely with the writers' room. And in particular, I was working with the co-creator, Kirsten Beyer, who herself has a background, a background in tie-in writing. She wrote a lot of the Voyager novels for Simon and Schuster, the relaunch kind of post show novels. So I was familiar with Kirsten and her work. And what she does is part of what she does, as well as co-creating shows, being a scriptwriter and all these things, is she liaises with the people who are doing the tie-in material, whether it's the books or the comics or whatever, and tries to hook them up with the show. And we'd worked together on a Discovery novel. I'd done a novel about Tilly, which again was a kind of yes, please, awesome character. And Kirsten and I got very well, and had a very good working relationship. So the chance to work with her, I think, as I get more and more projects, I'm able to kind of say it's people I want to work with, because I know that we get on really well and that we generate good story. So we just worked very closely. We knew it was going to be a prequel novel, and that it was leading up to it was the story of why he left. So I think the cover of the book is him kind of quitting, isn't it? It's kind of hanging back the convention, and that's where we know the book is going to end. So it's the story leading up to that, tracking the path of why a man who is above all epitomizes Starfleet comes to the point where he believes that he has no place in this institution anymore. And that's a story I love. You know, how people gain affinity and lose affinity with institutions is with group identities or social identities, and how they lose that and become outliers or outsiders is just a story I'm really interested in. So I was there for it, and that it happened to be like the major series that everyone was talking about was just incredible. Yeah.
Well, and now that I'm talking to you and I can see some of your interests in things that outside of Star Trek, I can see why Kirsten Beyer would go to you and would think that you were the person to do this, especially with the way that you wrote about Cardassia, that the fall of the Romulan Empire and the you know, basically what you had to do. And it's funny because if you read my review of your book, I basically said, well, and I'm going to get into some more details about this, but you had a magic trick to pull because you had an A, B, C, D storyline, and you had to make the political machinations of this crisis exciting, you know? And
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why this book sung to me, my father was a political scientist who was an expert in bureaucracy. And so,
oh wow, yeah, sure. Oh, be still my beating heart.
right. And so for me, it was funny because I wondered when I was writing my review of it, how much of this book was just made for me, because one of the reasons why the series Picard worked for me, and I watched the entire series before I read your book, and went back and read it as a prequel. And I'm actually glad I did it that way. But the reason why I was so excited to read it was because whenever I heard about his mission and the bureaucracy and all the things he had to do, I'm one of the few people that was like,
awesome.
Yeah, what happened? Like, how did that work? And
yeah. I have a whole bit at the start where I'm going, logistics. It's like magic. And I really think it is. I get really excited about large numbers of people coming together and doing really good things. I just think it's an amazing thing. And this is what they try to do in this book, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work this time.
Yeah, Picard has an impossible mission. He knows this at the beginning, but we're going to try to do whatever we can.
And we know that, but I don't think he does. I think at the start he feels like it's you know, the hand of history has landed on his shoulder. You know, come the hour, come the man, kind of thing. My whole career has brought me to this moment, to this great task, and I am here facing Dunkirk, and I'm going to turn this into victory in Europe. And it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way.
And why it's so important because what we talk about on this show is arcs, and why it's such an important thing for Picard, and why it was so important for setting up the show, is that he's always succeeded. He saved the Federation from 2 Borg invasions. He was there. You know, he saved the timeline and First Contact. He did all these things. He's always been able to save everyone he tried to save. For the most part. Now there was the episode with the Bajoran ensign
Ensign Rowe. Ensign Rowe?
No, it was the one that died. It was the Lord.
Okay.
But I always thought I always thought that was an important episode because it was a time where his mission failed. And I know some Star Trek fans have had a problem with the fact that Picard had failed so miserably on this. But I think, and look, you know, I have my father just passed away last year. He was in his 80s, but how wonderful is it to get to see our heroes get old and fragile? And I loved that about this show. And so what was it like to write, you know, Picard failing at this mission? It seemed like it was such an important part of setting up the arc for the series.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, the book's only ever going to end on a downer, which is, I think, is something you've got to be, you're thinking through very hard, because this is Star Trek, and I think, you know, people have this expectation that there will be a a message of hope or of change. But I guess we have to see failure in order to learn to see. That sounds really trite, but you have to see failure. You have to see people fail. And I think that gives, I hope that what that does then is give depth. If you've read this and you know the show, then it kind of brings depth to that story, or further depth to that story of him digging deep again in the televised show, and finding that essential part of him that pushes him to look for answers, even after so devastating a blow. And things don't always work out. So you're sort of juggling things. But it felt like a very melancholy book to write. People don't end in good places. But at the same time, you've got to have this sort of maybe a kind of tingle of bells, which is the the promise of what you'll see in the future. Yeah,
because you know that those arcs are getting solved in the show.
yeah.
So I know that if I was in your position and if I was sitting down to write this story, I would have been very I would have had a lot of focus and energy on the relationship between Admiral Picard and Rafi, because you're going to have to set up their friendship. And they did such a great job of making them feel in that third episode when they introduced Rafi. Like, I felt like, oh, I can see that they were friends. I didn't know from what. So, I would have thought that putting some attention into their friendship was something that you probably concentrated a lot on.
Yeah. I mean, we really wanted to give Rafi lots of space because she is so crucial, and we don't know her. We know Deanna, we know Will, but who is this person calling him JL? And it's all that one of the enjoyable aspects of doing something like this is that you're reading scripts as they're coming in. So I'm kind of getting the scripts in and reading them, and the scripts were so rich and so richly imagined, so thematically deep and tonally very beautiful. And Rafi's all there on the page, and she's there in performance. So it's this is exactly what actors do, is that they're given, actors are just amazing. They're given a script, and there's a great deal of depth to these scripts already, but then a really good actor working with another one is able to imagine all this emotional depth and years of a relationship. So Rafi, I got quite involved in, not least because I've said this before, but I was writing this book over a summer holiday. And my my little girl was sort of, Mummy, are you coming out to play today? And I'm going, no, I must work. There's a lot of that goes on the page with Rafi, who's kind of missing important soccer matches, but at least she's saving billions of Romulans. Right. I'm imaginatively saving billions of Romulans. So there's that kind of maternal guilt of not being present is there with Rafi. So I channeled that. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned something that I think is, you had a really unique relationship to this show beyond the fact that you were writing the prequel, but you had the scripts coming in. And what was that experience like, reading it at the script phase? I mean, you're not reading it like anyone else would, because you're reading it automatically thinking about how you're going to tell your story. So that sounds really fascinating to me.
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, it's just it's whatever you're imagining. It's that exciting, and it's that interesting, and you're seeing kind of scripts revise as well. So you're seeing the stories deepen, and see the stories come together. So I think it's like seeing, it's mirroring your own experience as a novelist. When you're working on a very big project and you've got these sketchy bits that are here and here, but you're working on a bit over here, and then you write something there and you go, oh, that's what needs to go into that earlier bit, or oh, now I understand why I wrote that scene that way, because it was building up to this one. So seeing all that kind of, I guess it was like seeing on a piece of tapestry or embroidery, seeing new colors come in and seeing that thread sort of working in, and I think what I had to do was not because you're seeing aspects of the story change as well. I had to keep quite focused on my sense that I was writing a prequel, so I didn't have to worry too much about how this story was going to turn out. I just needed to know the kind of parameters of how it was starting and the big messages of how it was starting. So I tried not to worry about what was going on over here and the end of the story, and just keep my focus on what I'm doing here. How do I write it and construct it in such a way that if they do change the plot, I don't have to rewrite half a book. So but it helped that it was a prequel.
Right. And so you're seeing these stories before, like most of us, we saw the trailer at Comic-Con, we got like little clues here and there. Did you have a moment that was the most like, oh my God, is this really happening?
Oh, I just spent, it was a whole process of, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I can't believe I'm working on this. It's so cool. And then the irony is that I think we didn't get it in the UK for a few days after. So you'd all seen episode 1 in the States, and I'm like, yeah, about over here. So it was, I think it was a couple of days or something. Oh, it was like 12 hours. I think you all got it, that evening, and then I had to wait for it to turn up on whichever channel we get it on over here. So it was really funny. So yeah.
No, and I gotta say, I was really impressed by how you weave the storylines in this book. It's a top-notch job of multiple storylines. There was because there's several years that this story takes place over. There's A, B, C, and D storylines that are planting seeds for 10 hours of television. So at the same time, like you're dealing with characters like, for example, Geordi is there. Worf is briefly there because we find out that there's some controversy over him stepping up. And so there's, you had a lot of things, a lot of balls to juggle here to keep those storylines straight. Did you outline or did you write?
Oh yeah, God, yeah, absolutely, yes. And the name of the game in this kind of because you invariably end up writing these novels very quickly. I think 7 weeks probably I wrote this in. But the outline was extremely detailed, and we'd really thought through what we were going to do.
And did you outline with Kirsten Beyer for that?
That's right, yes, and also with Dayton Ward, who knows Trek backwards, So and we took time over things like that. They are very good at thinking about things like who's going to take command of the Enterprise. Because that's the kind of thing I would forget about, because I'd be going story, and they'd be going, whoa, no, hang up. We've got, there are these things that we need to think about that will matter and that do matter. So that's when writing, having a sort of group of people around you that you're sounding these ideas off is really important. So yes, we outlined in detail, and then I find once you have the outline, then the thing about writing novels is it's very lonely, and you have to keep your focus. You've got to be quite focused on something intensely. So I like to do it as quickly as possible. So the actual sitting down and putting words on the page, it's like, I just want to get this done. I want this book finished. So that outlining stage is really, really important, because it means that you're not sitting down one morning going, what the hell am I meant to be doing? Particularly when you've got lots of demands. I've got quite a young daughter, so I don't want to be spending 15 hours a day trying to get 1,000 words out. I want to be working, and then yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, and so a good tie-in writer has to understand that you have the benefit of writing characters that they already know a little bit. And so, but you had to get in the headspace of Picard. Did you take any special steps to try to think through Picard's arc on this? Did you watch particular episodes or anything like that? Or did you feel like...
Yes, I sort of, the way I write it, I don't have very strong visual imagination, but I voice matters a great deal to me. So to sort of have a sense of, so I watched episodes just to kind of tune into speech patterns and things. But what I wanted to be very careful that I was doing was that this wasn't a Next Generation novel. This was a Star Trek Picard novel. So I wanted to make sure that tonally it was in line with those scripts. And tonally, Star Trek Picard is quite different from Next Generation. I think the Orville is probably slightly closer to Next Gen. I mean, take out the silliness, but the other one, lift out Seth MacFarlane, and then basically you've pretty much got Next Gen. But Star Trek Picard is a different show. It's more melancholy. It's much more autumnal. It's about the autumn of somebody's life, and that's very different from
And the
Next Gen.
Federation, really.
And absolutely, yeah. So this is not, we're not talking about a superpower at the top of its game. We're talking about doubt and concern about identity and the extent about loss of power and loss of effectiveness, and that's very different. So it had to be that Picard rather than the Picard of Unification that I watched today, for example. It's a very different person. Yeah. So it had to be him.
Well, and that's right. And those of us who've watched parents age know that our parents, when they get older, are not the same people that they were when they were younger.
Indeed.
And I love that the show leaned into Picard being older and that he wasn't the big action hero. He had to be saved a few times. And
yeah. The most moving storyline, I think, in that respect is Deanna's, where you see her fearfulness for her surviving child.
Yeah,
I found that an extremely moving performance, a really moving narrative as well. There's a fear when she looks at her daughter because she's lost a child, and I think that's a really, really brave place they went, actually, and really great part as well performed. So yeah, that autumnal vibe to it.
So and one of the first commentaries I did on this podcast was comparing where I thought the writers of Picard got great lessons, I think, from watching Last Jedi, the right lessons, because I'm a big.
Oh, I love Last Jedi. I love it.
Me too.
Very good. It's my favorite.
Yeah. And but one of the things that's so important, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is that the Federation's not in a good place, right? But it makes sense story-wise. They survived the Dominion War and 2 Borg invasions, and this, and so, and judging from we've already that's great fodder for you. That seems like perfectly right up your alley. That's one of the things that I love too, because I kept thinking about all the stories that were there. I just recorded a commentary on why I think it would make sense to cross over Jake Sisko, because he would obviously be a war correspondent and somebody who would cover this and would cover this crisis. And we had the added benefit that his father thought Picard killed his mother.
Yeah, it's a great move, actually. Yeah.
And but when you think of that wider tapestry and how Picard, I've been so, I don't want to get into totally with the fans that are bothered by like the Federation not being perfect, but to me, this struggle to win back the soul of the Federation,
absolutely,
through one man, that's the heart of the Roddenberry vision through Picard. Right?
Absolutely. I think exactly that if Picard has become disillusioned, something has happened. But also I think it's Star Trek is about the notion of America as an experiment in utopia, an experiment in creating the shining city on the hill, and we see this in The Dispossessed, Le Guin's best novel, to my mind. What happens to utopia when it's tested, and that's the real test. Utopia isn't static. Utopia is process. How do we preserve what is good? when it's under duress, how do we not lose the principles? How do we keep it going? And that's a question that Star Trek is asking through Picard, and therefore analogously is asking about the United States. So I think it's completely, utopia is always going to hit pressures. Will it crack? Will it change? Will it keep going? And that's what the story is about for me. And it's a very important one to tell, I think.
Right. And it's clear that Kurtzman and Bayer and Chabon were thinking about the border crisis when that was going on here, and the refugee crisis and the caravan and all that was happening when they were doing a writer's room. But what's interesting to me is that and kudos to you, because you could not have known what world you were unleashing this book into, as far as the pandemic that came, but also a storyline. And I recently interviewed Josh Mallerman for my other podcast, who wrote Bird Box. And, he put out a sequel to Bird Box, and a huge part of the sequel to this book is the debate over whether you should wear the blindfold or not. And who knew that would become, the mask wearing debate would become such a big thing when he wrote it.
Yep.
And here with this Picard novel, you have a Romulan character who is denying the science left and right, and is trying to say, like, hey, this isn't happening, we don't have this concern. And I think the man who refuses to believe the science, where that's when I was talking about A, B, C, and D storyline, that's kind of the D storyline here. That one was obviously yours. Where did that come from? Or it came in the outlining process, at least. That's
yeah. Well, I mean, I think in general we're seeing a sort of anti-intellectualism, and that was there well before denying COVID or refusing to wear masks. That comes from anti-vaxxing. That comes from obviously climate change denial. So I can't see it, so it can't be happening. Well, okay. Oh yeah, these numbers are big. I don't understand them. They can't be true. Well, so I think that what I was tapping in there was this general anti-intellectualism, or a kind of pride in ignorance that is very dispiriting. And so I guess it's no surprise really that people go, well, it's not that bad, is it? Or what's a mask going to do? Right. So it's part of what we've been watching for a long time. So
right, and this is one of the things that to me made this a superior work of tie-in fiction, is that felt like there was lots of really heavy political themes that were throughout this book as well. That this isn't just for the and I'm not criticized, because I'm one of these people. Like, it's not just for the nerds who know exactly the call sign numbers, or as John Ortiver says, he got the job editing Star Trek books because he knew Spock's blood type. And
oh wow, I'm not sure I could tell you that.
Right. I mean, those of us who know those things are important, but I
know those things.
But I think for a casual Star Trek fan, I think that this book would also work, because I think it just adds so much depth to the show, but it also it says a lot about our world today, partially because it is a prequel to a show that says a lot about our world today. And so I was very impressed with that. Now, that being said, one of my things that I refuse to, I gave this book 5 stars. I loved it.
Good. As long as that was out of 5.
Out of 5. I gave it 5.
Out of 20.
Yeah.
See, you can see that I always ask a scale. So, I'm not scientifically minded.
But it's funny because my style in writing reviews, because I have over 1,000 book reviews on my blog, is that I always have to find something that I kind of push or pull with. And
you didn't like the swearing, did you?
No, I was fine with this.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry, you're going to say the swearing. Okay, I'll shut up.
Now, my two favorite characters on the show. Now, this is more of a problem that I had with the show than I had with your novel.
Oh, that's their problem.
Okay. But Laris and is it Zaban?
Shaban, yeah.
Zaban, yeah. My favorite characters on the show. I don't care that she's a Romulan with an Irish accent. I can live with that.
Lots of planets have an island.
Right. They were my two favorite characters, and he left them at the chateau. If you have Romulan spies who are trained, you take them on the mission, right? Take them on the mission.
Yeah, you might do. You might do. You might not want to get them into trouble. There might be, yeah.
Now, I wondered, though, there's a Romulan character who betrays Picard in this story. And the whole time, because I wasn't looking at names right away, I assumed it was Shaban, right? And that was the, and it seemed like him being involved in the rescue mission and Laris being involved in the rescue mission seemed like a logical way to deepen their friendship. So my only thing, and I don't know if this was like studio notes or whatever, but it seemed like that was a missed opportunity to introduce those characters and to deepen those characters. I don't know if that was something you talked about.
We'd thought of putting them in that bit of the story. Actually, we sort of originally conceived that bit of the story with the possibility of using them, and then the comic strip happened, and their story was there instead. So we kind of went, are we going to have them there? No, they're going to be over there. So, but we loved the senator, and that we knew this bit of story had to. So that's one of those things where you're writing a story where you're going with this possibility that it might involve these people, but you try and construct a story that's strong on its own terms. Yeah.
I knew there was a lot.
Very good.
I knew there was a lot of I haven't read the comics yet. I do want to read them, but
yeah, they're great. Yeah.
But that was the only thing that, like, because I kept waiting for them to have more.
Yeah.
And so again, I think that was more of a, obviously it's because they were in the graphic novel. But yeah, and I did think, and look, it's not every tie-in novel I give 5 stars to, because but and I don't say that in an insulting way. I read a lot of tie-in novels.
You haven't read any of my other ones yet, so
I think it's up there. I definitely got to read your stuff with Cardassia, and
I think you'd really go for that. I think you'd actually really enjoy the Tilly novel, which is kind of like the happy version of Last Best Hope.
Let's talk about that, because we're talking about Star Trek story and arcs. So what was your marching orders with Tilly's arc? Because I love Tilly as a character. I think she's a great.
Of course you do. She's fantastic. Yeah. It's Tilly's prequel story. It's how Tilly comes to join Starfleet. So it's a young adult Bildungsroman. It's how Tilly goes to the stars. It's called The Way to the Stars. It's about the decisions that Tilly makes that take her to Starfleet. So it's a story about a young woman finding her role in life. And again, I sort of conceptualized it as a feminist novel. It's she's surrounded by many women who influence her for good or bad, or for indifferently. So I kind of I just thought, let's give her a set of female mentors and role models that she can bounce off and see what kind of life she can lead. So it's like the happy version of Picard's story. It's someone much earlier in the history of the Federation, right, choosing her path into Starfleet, as opposed to someone later leaving it. So it's a very Star Trek book, and a very Tilly book.
Well, and I want to, another compliment I want to give to your Picard novel too, is that one thing that I complain about with some Star Trek, and one thing that I would love to see writers put more of a stamp on, and I think Discovery did a good job with this a little bit. They started to do this, which is to remind people they are in space, that they are in You know, I think Discovery does it well with like having the cameras go upside down and come like
Yeah,
and
yeah.
have it up and down, and in the very early in Discovery, they actually like paid attention to the fact that they need to control gravity or air supply and all those things, and there were enough little nods in there to the fact that space is wide and long in your novel that I was like, okay, she gets it. I'm glad, because every time I read a Star Trek novel, I'm always like, are they going to
I,
remember
r-
space?
I really worry about that because I'm not I'm quite lazy about that kind of thing. So I really, really worry about it. So maybe that's why I always remember to put it in. Oh, these are vast distances,
Yeah.
how are we getting away with this? It's not like catching a bus. It's that Douglas Adams thing, you think it's a long way down the road to the coast. It's the last peanuts to space, So it's big. It's really big.
Right, which is one of the reasons why I think as an adult, like I love Star Trek the Motion Picture, which I did when I was a kid, but now I think it's the most sci-fi of the movie.
Yeah.
So it's it, and I'm one of the other things about me is I'm an astronomy nerd. So like,
Okay, yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of Enterprise. I like
Mm,
seasons 1 and 3, which is weird to say, like,
mm,
but that's exactly the seasons I like. But one of my favorite moments on Enterprise is the scene when they're on another planet and they're looking
mm.
for our star. And I was like, yeah, because you would do that.
You would do that, yeah. You
Yeah,
might not take your dog down to a planet that's never been visited before, but
yeah, you might not do that. Yeah. All right.
why not?
Una, it was great talking to you because
My pleasure.
I really enjoyed this novel, and
Thank you.
to my shame, I'm going to have to go back and make sure that I read all the Garrick stuff because as a great he's one of my favorite characters. But I will say I have, and since the time that I read this Picard novel, I have been collecting paperbacks with your name on it
That's what we like to, yeah.
over there. I have a lot of Dickheads reading to do for the Philip K. Dick thing this year, and then hopefully next year I'm gonna chill out on it a little bit.
Well,
And
you read some Cardassia, and I'd love to come back and talk Cardassia with you.
yeah,
So,
I would love to too because I and like I said, with my father being who he is, I definitely get into those things, and it's funny because my dad didn't read fiction, right?
okay, right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And but we had a rule in our house when I was growing up that he would buy any book for me as long as I proved to him that I read it, right? And then so he got me a lot of science fiction when I was a kid,
That's
but we
really good.
also talked about things over dinner. And one of the reasons why I think the interplay between bureaucracy and science fiction like meant a lot to me is because I spent a lot of time talking to him. And even if he like didn't get it, for example, the first time I read The Dispossessed, I called up my father and I said, Dad, let me ask you a few questions about this science fiction book. And then I had to get him through all the ideas. But I will say, I thought a lot about how he would have taken some of the things that were going on in this with the Romulan mission, and that is a testament to what you did with this book. I'm
That's
really
very kind. Thank you.
no,
Thank you very much.
I
Thank
mean
you.
it. It's a very impressive work of the A, B, C, D, and C storylines. I can see where it would be very helpful to have two friends in Dayton and Kirsten to throw ideas off of. But in
Yeah.
the end, you were the one that had to stitch it together, right?
I did, yeah. They were all very. It was quite a tight schedule, and they were all. You could be all right. Can we bring you snacks? And I'm good to go. I'm happy to write this one. So I think they were quite anxious for me, but I was just. I had a ball with this book. It's just all my subjects, and I loved it. I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Okay, and are you coming back to Star Trek anytime soon, or
I'd like to. Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, in fact, I have my book coming out this month, the autobiography of Catherine Janeway. So I've written a book which is sort of the conceit is that I've kind of interviewed her, and I've sort of typed that up and written her life story. So it's a sort of first person account of Catherine Janeway's life and times. So from childhood to Admiralty. So
anyone that is new to this podcast, if they go back in the feed, I'm from Bloomington, Indiana.
oh, right, okay.
Bloomington is my hometown. So Catherine Janeway and I share a hometown.
Yeah.
And in fact, I interviewed the two organizers who put up the monument
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
in Bloomington. And the monument is actually about 2 blocks from the last place I lived in Bloomington before.
That's very cool.
So
I've seen Scotty's monument in Linlithgow, future birthplace of Montgomery Scott.
that's great. Well, yeah, that's what they're doing. They have a bust, a mold, and then a plaque that has. And one of my favorite things about this memorial or this future home statue is that on the plaque it has a map where it shows the where they started in the Delta Quadrant to Earth. And
that's great.
Yeah,
that's lovely. I'm going to look that up online. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's a fun interview because we got to really geek out about Janeway and some of it, like, it was funny. Before the interview started, we started talking about what part of town we thought she'd live in, and well,
you can see my take as somebody who's only ever been I've been to LA, but the furthest Midwest I've been is Chicago. So you can have a look and laugh at me.
Well, I'm very excited to read that. That hometown connection with Janeway is something that I really appreciate. And Janeway as a character, I think, is underrated. I used to get things thrown at me for saying that I thought she was a better captain than Picard.
Oh, ouch! Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a heavier debate, but
yeah.
But if you look at what she did on Scorpion alone, like, to save her crew, come on,
But on the other hand, Tuvix.
That's true. On the other hand, Tuvix. Well played, Una. Well played. All right. As everyone can see, a Star Trek nerd down to her heart.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us, and
my pleasure.
We'll have you back to talk Garrick at some point.
Yes, please. Always happy to do that.